I don't think it's a stretch to say that Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was revolutionary in its titular series. After several similar yet loved entries in this shooter series, the first Modern Warfare title really brought a new life into the scene. There were a lot of advancements made during the development of the game, not only the expected increases like improved AI, but the large steps of physics-based action, even determining how much more or less damage a bullet impact might cause based on the material one was shooting through. Following this trend of realism was the enlisted involvement of members of the US Marines, who gave feedback on motion capture and combat experience to make the game more realistic than ever. After all, it's not just the graphics that make a game real, but the emotion too. And with all the improvements that Infinity Ward made, they ushered in not only the current era of Call of Duty over a decade later, but they impacted the personality of shooter games for years to come. Unfortunately, the Call of Duty series has not seen its brightest days over the last few years, and while declines in critical scores are expected every once in a while for long series games, what if there's something more going on here? Maybe there is something in the structure of this series that has gone awry. Let's figure it out together. It's time we take a look at how Call of Duty has changed over the years in order to find out what's so great about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Call of Duty is well known as having an aggressive release schedule, supplying its fans with annual games over the last 13 years. Due to this frequency of releases, as well as the division of labor between three major developers, it's easy to get lost on what makes a Call of Duty game fit into its own series anymore. I mean, there are not only the ideas of three different developers, but the preferences of the fan base as well, not to mention changes to gaming and multiplayer entertainment in general. And Call of Duty gets a bit of a harsh rap for either changing too much or not enough with every entry. We often hear about how the Call of Duty series needs to return to its roots, as if the earlier games were inherently better just because of their structure or setting. However, how can we even define the design of a Call of Duty game anymore? The series has made so many advancements and changes that it's hard to even call it the historical shooter that it began as. We've had so many different settings, timelines, and game styles that we have to accept that the series is a wide variety, attempting to reach all types of players. But if we really want to say that the truest form of this series is in the realistic war setting, then let's take a look at the most recent release, and acknowledge both its achievements and flaws. Let's take a look at a couple numbers here, specifically sales and scores for every Call of Duty title since Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. When looking at millions of units sold, we can see a steady increase in sales as the series really hit its stride in the Modern Warfare trilogy. And while slightly declining over the following years, the Call of Duty franchise really held its ground as one of North America's highest selling game series for nearly a decade. You probably noticed the unbelievable drop-off in sales for both Infinite Warfare and the remaster of Call of Duty 4. Well, for the remaster, it's frankly very difficult to find accurate sales numbers due to the separate releases of both packaged and then standalone. And as for Infinite Warfare, we can probably chalk that up to the incredible fanbase backlash that was visible at its announcement. At the time of recording this episode, it's still a little early to get solid sales numbers of Call of Duty World War II, but it was announced that it has already grossed over $1 billion, making more money than any title since Black Ops 2. However, if we look at the aggregate scores of fans between PC, PS4, and Xbox One, then we can plainly see that it is the third lowest scoring game in the entire series, according to fans, which, oddly enough, really matters in a game with such a large audience. Compared to the recent increase in sales, these scores don't do the game much of a service. It really blends into the other titles that fans have had wishy-washy opinions of. If Call of Duty World War II was finally that return to form that we've been wanting, then why did it sell so well yet score so low? Well, that comes from the fact that this isn't really a return to form at all. In very different ways between both campaign and multiplayer, I would dare to say that this feels the least Call of Duty-ish than any Call of Duty has ever felt, at least since such a rebirth as the release of the first Modern Warfare. Now, this has good and bad aspects. In multiplayer mode, the changes seem to be more bad than good. They've taken away a lot of customizability in favor of an odd, Battlefield-like class system that restricts you to one perk and some class-specific abilities. They've also incorporated loot boxes, the bane of the current gaming climate, as well as a system in which you have to spend credits just to access challenges. As with recent Call of Duty entries, you can't access new weapons just by reaching the level. Instead, you unlock them at that level, and then you spend an unlock token to, well, unlock them again. However, this is nothing new. On another note, the campaign mode seems to have changed more for the better, having new segments of gameplay not seen in previous installments, new reward-based interactions with your crew, and finally a return to gritty, realistic violence that frames the topic of all of these games, war. Do you know why it seems so brutal to see the gore in Call of Duty World War II? It's because Sledgehammer has brought back the stakes. Consider the first level of Black Ops 3. The very first level ends with your character literally having both arms ripped off by a robot. But it's no big deal because we can just turn him into a bionic man with rocket legs. But this newest entry made everything matter again. No more sci-fi, no more bionic man, no more nanobots, just the realistic war game that brought this series into the public eye so many years ago. Let's all accept something for a second here. There's nothing wrong with a bionic Call of Duty, not by any means. The success of any series often requires trying different things, and if that requires a spin-off here or there, or even a rare main entry that is vastly different, then this helps to keep a franchise fresh. The problem instead is when a historically based series has every main entry for almost 5 years based in a fictional world that is so different from what it was always known for. Give us an occasional wacky setting to mix things up, but don't change the core of the series from POWs and front lines to jetpacks and nanobots. Just look at Battlefield, a series known mostly for a modern setting, suddenly throwing it way back to World War I. And this difference created a smash hit because it was the same game that the fanbase loved, but in new locations. And DICE was even able to scoop up some of the alienated Call of Duty fans who were missing that historically accurate backdrop. Okay, but you say, the setting of Modern Warfare wasn't historical. It was a totally fictional account of events that just seemed to be in modern locations. You're right. But there is a focus in that setting that needs to be acknowledged. Even though the events of the game are fictionalized, we can identify all of the parallels to real life and the current climates of the Middle East, ongoing then and now, with many of us knowing of somebody who has been involved in these conflicts. The story may not have been relatable exactly, but it was all recognizable. One thing that needs to be understood is that drama doesn't come from volume. People are smart, and they don't need to be yelled at in order to understand that a scene is important. Let's take a look at one of the arguably most popular stages in Call of Duty history, one that people still reference to this day and even had bonus missions based on it in subsequent titles. This segment is of course the All Gillied Up mission from Modern Warfare and the immediate follow-up stage of One Shot One Kill. These two missions, which we'll just call one stage for simplicity, are frequently cited by fans of the series as one of the most intense and enjoyable levels in the entire Call of Duty franchise. And why is that? It's because the drama in this level doesn't come from screaming and explosions like some interactive Michael Bay film. Instead, Captain McMillan only directs you with the most essential instructions. In this instance, the silence created the drama. Sneaking under enemy convoys and skirting their line of sight keeps you on edge so the mission doesn't fall apart. In Part 2, once McMillan is injured, the rules have changed, and now he still helps to direct you to your evac point, but it's up to you to keep this character safe. A character that you may have only known for one level as a player, but you have a connection with due to working so closely in tandem with them on this important mission. Now you have to pay back his deeds by getting him to safety. The same style of quiet storytelling was visible on the first proper level of Modern Warfare, Crew Expendable. Your team relays only using the most essential combat-based communications, underlining the importance of the mission and favoring a method of proficiency over showmanship. Even when things go south and the ship starts sinking, your team remains as proficient as possible to keep each other safe. All of this is the drama that was lost in the new Call of Duty World War II. In the first level on the beaches of Normandy, there is a great new rail segment of gameplay where you have to drag a wounded teammate to cover. This is a great instance of different gameplay to connect to a character that you, as a player, have only hardly met. However, this moment is squandered when both your player and your ally are screaming at each other. Wouldn't it be more dramatic if he were bleeding out, losing consciousness, and you felt the urgency to get him to safety? That is what I mean when it comes to the whole silence creates drama. As players, we don't want to be told that something is important, we want to feel it as important to us. I won't pretend that Modern Warfare doesn't also have its own fair share of explosions and shouting. After all, it is just an interactive action film. There has to be some chaos with the spectacle. The difference is in the fact that these segments are just filler between the story. For many of the recent Call of Duty entries, that filler has become almost the entire game. Let's focus specifically on what Modern Warfare did right, beyond not talking too much. First off is the very important focus on a complete reinvention of the multiplayer system. This provided ridiculous levels of customization and personal game styles that were simply unavailable in the first few Call of Duty entries. They even structured the maps off of the campaign, which rewarded the players that spent time in single player with a slight familiarization to the feel of the game in order to give them a slight upper hand from the beginning of their multiplayer career. And the career, oh boy, let's talk about those challenges. They may seem kind of pointless, after all, many of those challenges may happen simply by playing the game, right? However, back when the first edition of Call of Duty 4 was released, keep in mind that there were no banners and emblems and all of that, so the only real incentive to complete these challenges was out of personal interest. This gave more goal-oriented players something to focus on. If players weren't interested in going online, they didn't have to worry, because they had an exciting, interesting, and memorable story waiting for them in the campaign. If you ask most Call of Duty fans who their favorite characters are, there's a really good chance it's one of the members of your Modern Warfare crew. The missions felt like you truly were some grunt like Soap, running through tests at the beginning and then going through steadily more complicated and difficult missions as things fell apart. The fact that this game didn't have to be based on real battles from World War II like the first two Call of Duty entries allowed it to take the perfect amount of creative liberties and make a fresh story without going off the rails. Where we seem to get muddled is by saying that we either need to go back to the series' roots or we need something brand new. When looking at the two highest scoring games in the series, Modern Warfare and World at War, we realize their success didn't come from either roots or reinvention. It was because both of these games, more so Modern Warfare, were not something new. Instead, they were the next logical step in something familiar. This series, having established itself on 7th generation consoles as a gritty, real-world historical shooter, now needed to launch itself into the era of multiplayer following the success of the Xbox's live matchmaking. With intense stories and completely revamped multiplayer, these games brought the visions of two separate developers' ideas on Call of Duty into the modern gaming world. All of these things we've discussed today about what has changed in the Call of Duty series are perfect examples of when a series no longer understands itself. The success of Modern Warfare came from the little details, not the grandeur. Explosions are always fun, but so is intense dialogue. Crazy inventions can be exciting, but so can realistic stakes. With understandable settings and effective communication, the campaign of the first Modern Warfare was interesting and self-standing enough to warrant two successful sequels. And the totally revamped multiplayer game mode created the structure of every main title entry until some recent changes. Even the remaster of this game wasn't successful just due to nostalgia. If Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare were released this day, it would still be a spectacular game without all of the bells and whistles because it makes sense. There's really nothing that can be added that would objectively improve this game. It brought a successful IP into the multiplayer world while still providing exceptional entertainment to people who just wanted to be told a story and have fun while experiencing it. That is what's so great about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming as we scoped out the world of Modern Warfare. We're tired of all the jaded negativity in the gaming world and we want to focus on what makes every aspect of gaming so great. If you think the same way, consider subscribing to be a part of our community, so you're always in on the discussions. If you have a favorite series or a single game that you think is great, leave a comment of your choice and we'll look into it. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.